Hello, and welcome to my virtual poster presentation at the 2020 LPA conference. My name is Stephen Hill, and thank you for attending. I'm a clinical assistant professor at the ULM College of Pharmacy, so I'm going to walk you through a project that myself and a couple of my ULM students helped get off the ground over the last year, and we'll talk about our project and what we found and answer questions for the live session. So first, I'd like to share my screen with you guys. So the idea for this project came from one of my students, Matt Heimel, or two of my students, Matt Heimel and Carly Roberts, and they saw this article about assessing pharmacists' readiness to dispense naloxone and Counsel on responding to opioid overdoses. This was a project that was performed in Massachusetts by a couple of faculty members at the College of Pharmacy in Massachusetts, and they surveyed the community pharmacies about things like naloxone and dispensing. And they brought it to my attention and thought it was a good idea or something we maybe could implement in Louisiana. So knowing that I spoke, did a variety of CEs on the topics of opioids and naloxone and different things for LPA and others, they brought it to my attention. We then took the survey. We asked permission from the authors to use their survey. We went to ULM's IRB and got IRB approval to provide the survey, and then contacted LPA and asked if we could distribute our survey at a couple of the live CEs that I had coming up. So that's how the project got started. The survey, let me switch over to that. We shared the survey at two different LPA meetings. One was a summer meeting and one was a local 5th district meeting, but this is the paper copy that of the survey that each person got who filled it out. As you can see, some of the first information is just location and time. And then the next 23 or so questions were about naloxone, either how to give it, do you carry it, do you recommend it to patients, how do you use naloxone, who's it used for, and so forth. And so it goes on through about 24 total questions for the survey. So getting to my poster and what the results of our project looks like, let me pull that up. So here's the poster and our results. Again, the title of our study was Assessing Louisiana Pharmacists' Readiness to Dispense Naloxone and Counsel on Responding to Opioid Overdoses. Obviously, I'm the lead author here. Also have Tori Griggs and Rachel Pecora, who helped me crunch all the data. Matt and Carly were instrumental in getting the project off the ground, getting it approved, and providing the original surveys. And then Tori and Rachel helped me put it all together, analyze the results, and make the poster. So quick an introduction. We sought to assess how well Louisiana pharmacists were ready to dispense naloxone and respond to opioid overdoses. Currently, as most of you should know, naloxone is available at all Louisiana pharmacies without a prescription under a standing order from the Louisiana Department of Health. But pharmacies aren't compelled to carry naloxone. They can choose whether or not to carry it and dispense it to their patients. So what we did, again, was that validated IRB survey that I showed you, 24 questions adapted with permission from the original authors. We distributed this at the LPA 2019 annual convention and a 5th district meeting later that same year in October. Pharmacists were asked an array of questions. I'm not going to go through all the questions we asked, but mainly about naloxone, what product they carried in the pharmacy, what kind of counseling is appropriate, how do you store it, how do you administer naloxone, and have anybody received prior training regarding naloxone. So that's kind of what we did and what we looked at. And so our results were that we had 62 pharmacists complete the survey. Our overall kind of overarching results were that majority of pharmacists surveyed indicated they carried at least one formulation of naloxone at their pharmacy. So 81%, which is an overwhelming majority, with nasal formulation, Narcan in particular being the most common, which is what we see in most communities nowadays. However, less than half so far had actually dispensed naloxone from their pharmacy. So we had most pharmacists carried the medications, but a little less than half, about 48%, had actually ever even dispensed it from their pharmacy. And so that was kind of good news, bad news in our mind, that yes, we have the drug out there more readily available than it used to be, but maybe we're not utilizing its distribution, utilizing its use as much as we could. Other questions and other results we looked at were, have you completed training for naloxone dispensing and storage? Again, the majority, and I'm going here to the bottom left of the poster, the majority of pharmacists had, about 52%, had attended some type of training for naloxone. Could have been something I did, potentially there, but also some had not. And then the question related to training that kind of went along with this was, would you benefit from additional training? Even if you've had training, would a person benefit from additional training about naloxone and rescue breathing? And again, we had a majority, a little less than 75%, say that yes, they would benefit from additional training. So it sounds like me and some other colleagues have some additional work to do, and would be obviously willing to continue to do that for whoever asks. Some further results, so moving over here to the top right of the poster. We asked pharmacists what steps should be taken before administering naloxone to a patient experiencing an opioid overdose. And you can see there's a variety of answers if you chose more than one step. So the actually correct answer here is right here, number 2, stimulate the patient and call 911. And unfortunately, only 11% of pharmacists answered that correctly, because you stimulate the patient first to see if they're awake, alert or not, give them a sternal rub or talk to them. They don't respond, you call 911, then you give naloxone, and then you do the further steps down the line. So that's where naloxone falls into those steps. And so the reason you call 911 first is because you need to activate the emergency response system, get the patient to a hospital to appropriate medical care as fast as possible. Then you give the naloxone. Then you start CPR and put the patient in recovery position if they do recover. And so that's the appropriate steps. So as we can see, we have a little more training to do here, with only 11% of pharmacists getting the steps before naloxone right the first time. And then finally, another question we asked about naloxone distribution is, does your pharmacy recommend naloxone to those who fill an opioid prescription at your pharmacy? Here, the majority of responses were that in some cases, the pharmacist will recommend naloxone, but not every case, obviously. And then no was 37% of the time, and yes to every single case was about 11% of the time. So again, obviously yes and or in some cases is probably what I would like to see more. But as you can see, that some people are still not comfortable, and this is something I hear a lot. I'm not comfortable talking to patients about naloxone, and so there are different tips and tricks that we don't have time for right now that can get you comfortable with, recommending naloxone in a non-threatening and a good environment to your patients. So in conclusion, we found that naloxone availability in our communities, in conclusion, we are stating that naloxone availability in communities has shown to be a key component in reducing opioid overdose deaths. And where we get that information is that communities that have seen an uptick in naloxone dispensing and distribution in the communities have actually either shown a slowing or a flattening of their opioid overdose deaths. And in places where there's not naloxone available or less naloxone available, their opioid overdose deaths have continued to climb. These results from our survey showed that while naloxone is readily available at most of our pharmacies, at least according to the pharmacists we surveyed, we think continued naloxone training is needed, both how to use it so we can then educate our patients how to use it, when to recommend it to our patients in certain scenarios, how to recommend it to our patients when we're not comfortable with that. And so we can get naloxone out there in the community, have it readily available, and educate our patients as best we can. And so that was kind of our findings from the study. We welcome any questions in the live session when you attend that, so please see me then. I'll be happy to answer questions. And again, thank you for attending.